That'll be great.
Now we're going to start transitioning into maintaining children's connections. And in this section, we'll be focusing more on the characteristics of self-awareness and self-reflection, appreciation for diversity and other worldviews, and being relationally oriented. Connections are important. So why are connections important? What makes this so important for our kids, and what does it mean for them? We're really looking at making sure we're building that, instilling that importance of a positive connection between the child and the biological family members, and also feeling connected with their foster family as well. This particularly, we also want to look at maintaining those connections with siblings, especially when siblings are separated in care and in different places, so that they're making sure that they're still being able to talk and connect with them and have visitation with them as well. Michelle?
Well, in regards for the individuals having and maintaining connections, it could look different for every situation. From like what I want to say, we mentioned this before, it can be a text, it can be FaceTime, it's making sure that they participate in the visitation. It may be including, once safety has been established and conversation is had with, with DCF. It could be, having the child, meet with the parent or meet with their other siblings outside of those scheduled visits. It doesn't have to be when they're scheduled for, it can be outside of that. It could be letting the foster parents know, just sending them the biological parents or a family member, sending them a text and just letting them know that the youth is doing well. Also keeping them informed of any doctor's appointments as well. I want to say this is mentioned, it might be in the video or further along, maintaining contact with siblings that are placed in different homes, or sometimes it may, depending on different factors, the sibling could lives in another state. And so how do we help facilitate that contact between the siblings?
And just remembering the importance of like a connection with siblings. For any of us that have siblings, whether positive or negative what the relationship is now as an adult, you still remember those childhood memories of the contact, of playing with each other, of talking with each other, and having those shared memories. So it's really important for our youth in care as well to be able to have opportunities where they can create those shared memories and have those connections if they're not able to be placed in a home together. So this is a video about Mary, and she's going to be talking about the importance of her connection to her sister. So we want to think about, why is this relationship so important to Mary? And I don't know what these little pink spots are that showed up again. I did something. I don't know what I did. I did it in one of the other classes too. I'm sorry.
And it wasn't until I hit 14 that I found out that Sylvia went back into the system, and they set us up for like a visit. She just seemed so happy, full of life. Like every time we had a visit, she'd make sure I had so much fun. I turned 18 and I found out that she went into transitional housing, and they said, you have the opportunity to get into this program too and maybe get into the same apartment as her. I was like excited, off the wall. I was, that's all I wanted for the longest time, to be close to somebody in my family, just because it's different. There's a different connection.
The sound was low again, right?
Yeah, very. I could barely hear.
Oh my God, I did more pink lines. Do you see that on your side too? The little lines? I don't know how I did that.
Just 3 little linings, nothing bad.
I know, but still, I don't even know how I did it. So I don't even know how to undo it.
I don't think you did it. I was trying to minimize my screen and then I saw those pop up with where my finger was. I was trying to manipulate my screen.
Well, it's a pin right there.
Oh, who
probably
did
the-
that? See,
Can
there's
I-
all the
oh.
lines that showed up. Doreen,
Oh,
is
where's
that
the
you?
eraser? I think I did it. Yeah.
I don't even know how you did that. You,
Oh, there it goes.
that's so funny. Okay, well, that makes me feel better. It wasn't me. 'Cause
I
was
got
like,
it. I fixed it. Sorry. Get the eraser and erase it. Okay, there you go.
So I
Oh,
know
here's
her, the video was hard to hear, but she was talking a little bit about what was important about when she got to see her sister and how it made her feel and being able to be connected and have fun and being able to talk to one another were some of the things that she was highlighting as what makes that relationship so important to her.
When siblings remain with the parents, in some cases, a child is removed while the other siblings remain in the home. For that child that is removed, it is possible that it could make that youth or that child feel rejected and potentially feel unworthy to go back home. Sometimes they have a hard time understanding why is it that my siblings can stay in the home and I have to leave.
I didn't know
Without-
that.
Huh?
I didn't know that can happen. I thought once one child is removed, all the children are removed.
It really depends on the case circumstance of what the finding is. So if one child is just having say a hard time being in the home, or specifically that one child is being abused, and say there's an older teenager that's in the home as well, they'll have conversations with the older teen to see if there's any allegations as well, or if there's reason to suspect
Mhm.
any kind of unsafe situation. And because in some states too, if the young person is old enough to say that they feel safe enough and they're able to speak on their behalf to advocate and say, like, when something is wrong, they may allow that young person to remain in the home. There's some situations also if the young person has severe mental health needs and they are considered like the identified child that needs services, that child may be removed from the home, while the other children can remain in the home. It all depends on what's going on. But when we're dealing with much younger children where there's a profound reason to suspect abuse or neglect, then they will do the emergency removal for all the children in the home. So it all just depends on what's going on with the case.
Mm.
So this was really highlighting what Michelle was saying also, fostering connections between siblings, especially when siblings are separated across state lines. In some situations, you may have children that are still remaining connected. Maybe one is living with another parent in another state or a family member somewhere else, or has been adopted somewhere else, and they're living outside of, say, Connecticut. Trying to see other creative ways that they can maintain connections. There's so much more that we can do now than in the past with social media, with technology like the FaceTime, the WhatsApp, and being able to have those kind of conversations, text messages or video calls. So the kids can have ways to talk with one another. And also thinking about like even video games. Little kids that they can be on, Xbox or PlayStation and be on playing a video game with a sibling who may be living somewhere else too, and being able to have those connections as well. Just trying to make sure we're always finding creative ways to ensure that the kids can remain connected and have moments together. And naturally, exactly what it says. Parents who are fostering and adopting must collaborate to support communication. There is a lot of collaborative work, and being, as much as you have a relationship with the young person that is being established and grown over time, you're also having that with the other adults in the children's lives, so that you can ensure that these kind of relationships can continue and that we can make it work in the interest of the children. Anything else?
Work out all the kinks.
Mm-hmm.
Right, establish a schedule or just a plan in order to have that contact continue and to be able to maintain too.
Mhm.
2 questions about maintaining meaningful,
Connections.
ooh, meaningful connections. Can't speak.
So how can a parent who is fostering or adopting maintain meaningful connections with a child's community and culture? So what's something you can think of? You get a new child in your home and I don't know, maybe they live 2
I
towns
would ask
over.
them about it. I would ask them if they know anything about the culture that their parents come from. Um, and have them show me pictures, or we could look up stuff on the internet to research it, you
Mhm.
know, and maybe try to integrate some recipes and things like those from that culture and community. Things like those I would do.
And I remember one of the classes Michelle talked about, one of the kids she had talking about like, what was it, grandma's recipe, the rice recipe, and being able to like try making the food herself because food's always such a big piece, right? That makes all of us feel good and you get those comfort foods and those flavors that you eat and you're
Yeah.
like, this makes me think of home right away.
Yeah,
Or you could go to a restaurant that
right.
serve that type of food,
Mhm.
Indian food, Italian food. There's so many different types of food. So whatever the child culture is, you could go to certain type of restaurant just to, just to learn and then try to do it at home, the same type of cooking.
And then there's those festivals and stuff that we have, the gathering like we have here in Waterbury,
Mhm.
where they show the different cultures come together and show off their artwork and, dance, music, food, and all of that. Those events and stuff, I would enjoy doing stuff like that.
Absolutely. And how can a parent who's fostering or adopting encourage connections between the child and extended family members?
By reaching out to them,
Mhm.
if you can reach out to the but sometimes when you're in foster care, they don't want you
Mhm.
might not can reach out to the siblings or whatever, but if you can, you encourage that, as you said, through games,
Mhm.
FaceTime.
Yeah. And sometimes you can even just start by having that conversation with the young person. Like, is there anyone else they would want to talk to or visit or reach out to? Because sometimes, depending on the workers involved with the child, they might not ask those questions. It's all these adults around the child doing things, making decisions, writing things down, communicating with each other, but forgetting to ask the child, like, who are you connected to? What matters to you? What's important to you? And sometimes, and we find this a lot when we're doing recruitment efforts for a young person to find other resources in their life, they may tell you about a cousin, an aunt, a family friend, someone that they knew before that they were really close to, and they want to have a connection with them. And then we can then go to the department and say, hey, do you know this person? Like, this is the person's number. And like, start having those conversations with the team so that we can start having those conversations with these people and see whether or not this is a viable connection. And is this something that would be positive for this young person? But it starts off with that communication and asking the questions.
And you also got to be careful with that too, because what happened with me when I was fostering this teen, she was telling me she wanted to call her cousins, and I didn't even know, I was getting called, and I didn't even know that this person was in jail that was calling, and she was telling me it was her cousin. So we have to make sure that these are people that's really all connected, family that's really connected to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like you start having those conversations and they tell you about that, then you let the FCA team know and the DCF team know, like, hey, this is who they mentioned. Is this viable? Like, is this person legit? Is this a real person that we can reach out to? Especially because we know with some of our older teens too, there's always potential for any kind of trafficking or inappropriate situations. And with kids who are very quick and good with technology, we know they start chatting people up on these little group chats on the game systems or on social media. So we need to make sure we're being aware of that and asking those follow-up questions.
Hey, Samantha, I told you about them girls.
Is Samantha on?
No, Samantha's not on right now.
Not on today.
No, she'll be
Yeah.
back with us on Monday.
Right.
It's not all the girls. Like, let's not give the girls a bad rap. But there is potential for that, unfortunately. So we're gonna segue into watching Vanessa and Debbie Shug talk about reconnecting with family when continuous contact was not possible. I hope the volume works better this time.
When Vanessa and her brother and sister joined our family, they were 6, almost 7, 4, and 3. We didn't have a lot of contact with birth family. They were scheduled visits. They were in reunification. But for a variety of reasons, the birth parents typically did not show up at the visits. They had maybe 1 or 2 visits where we didn't get to actually interact with them, but we saw them from kind of across the room.
When we moved in with, the Shug family, with my mom and dad, there was a little bit of sense of comfort knowing that I had, my siblings with me, but I also felt really confused and lost at the same time, and I kind of felt blame, kind of guilty at the same time.
Vanessa carried a tremendous amount of guilt for caring for her younger siblings and having that level of responsibility, and feeling like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but feeling like maybe it was your fault that you ended up in foster care, because at that age, of course, you think that the world revolves around you. And so as a 6-year-old, Vanessa would have horrible, just debilitating migraines. So every 20 to 30 days, she'd get a migraine that lasted for 2 or 3 days, where she was just rocking, had to be in a dark room, was throwing up, had to miss school, and it was a tremendous amount for this little tiny, she was an itty bitty thing. I mean, she weighed like, 32 pounds or something at 6 years old. So she was a little tiny thing, and having just these tremendous migraines that went on for months and months. And then finally in therapy, they were able to pull in a member of the birth family to literally say, it wasn't your fault. It was the adults who were making the wrong choices. Poof. And she didn't have any migraines after that. They were gone. And when Vanessa and her siblings first came to us, it was really our first experience with foster care. So we didn't know as much about birth families and the value of birth families to kids. And her family had a lot of gang involvement. There was a lot of domestic violence, a lot of criminality. And so it's interesting, it seemed to kind of play out intergenerationally. Like, my husband and I were concerned. My mom was worried. My grandparents were terrified. Like, there was this piece where I think we've had this kind of evolution where we have a much better understanding now of how people grow and change and how they care about the kids. So we were cautious, but we felt like it would be important to maintain contact.
I had a lot of questions, but I think I just didn't know really how to word it and how to have it come out. I know I was curious when I was a kid, like, why were we taken? Was it my fault? I had those questions as a kid, but as I got older, I got more curious about who they are. Do I have any siblings? How many cousins do I have? Where are my birth parents, my birth mom and dad? So I did, but I think the questions didn't really start to develop till I was probably, I want to say, in middle school. So I was starting to really ask these questions, like, what's the history like with them? But I was in high school, and I went to a friend's house, and I went and checked my MySpace, and I went and checked my messages, and there was a message from my birth mother's sister, who had contacted me with this long paragraph just stating, I know your birth dad. I'm your birth mom sister. I know your brother and sister. She named, their names and our ages and our birthdays. And, I was surprised. I was just like, I didn't really know what to say. I didn't respond back yet. Went home and actually talked to my mom about it and told her.
You did. You sent me a text. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You sent me a text. And the text said, Mommy, I have great news. Right? So this aunt has found me. And at the moment I was like, oh boy. Because we hadn't had any contact for 10 years at that point. We had sent pictures and letters to the county, to the social worker there, but the birth family had not left their most current address. So nothing really happened there. And so after 10 years, she sent this, and I thought, well, we must have done something right because she's telling me, which is really important, and she thinks that I'm going to be excited about it. I tried. It took a minute. And then, so the way that we had talked about the birth family had always been, we were very factual about what had happened and about the abuse and neglect and things like that, but also very compassionate and respectful about them as people. And so I felt in that moment like we must have done something right for her to come to me right away and say we have this contact, because that's what we want. We don't want them to go underground with it or feel like it's something that they have to hide. And so I called her, and I wasn't really sure what we were going to say, but I called and said, Vanessa gave me your number, and she was so scared that I was going to be mad at her. She was really, really scared that I was going to be angry. And I said, no, I want to thank you. And she said, thank me? And I said, yeah, because of all the things that the kids remember, and a lot of them were really scary and really painful, the one thing that they remember that was positive was that you went and got them cereal. And they were in the habit of having to search for food, and Vanessa going out and, getting things out of garbage cans and things like that. And they remember that you went and got them cereal and brought them cereal, and I always wanted to thank you for that. Then we started talking, and she said that some of the family would like to come down and meet them. And at that point, we had experience with birth family and navigating those relationships from the other sibling group that we had adopted. So we were pretty open to it, and we ended up picking a time that would be at our park in our town. We were going to be down there for her brother's birthday, and said, okay, well, we're going to be at this park. I wasn't really ready to have them come to the house yet because I hadn't met them in person, but I said, you're welcome to come and visit us there. We go over to greet them. They all come down. No birth parents. Birth parents were not ready to meet the kids at this point. So this is all extended family. Okay, cousins, aunt, uncle, grandparents, Nana. And they come down, and so I go introduce myself, and we've always treated birth family with dignity and humanity and respect. So, hug them, hi, I'm Debbie, et cetera, et cetera. And we're kind of gathered around, and the grandpa in the wheelchair grabs onto the side of the wheelchair and starts to push himself up, and the whole family goes, and they all take a step back and gasp. And so we're all looking at each other. Well, Grandpa has no hip bones. He's had the balls of the ball and socket joint have been removed. So he has no hip joints, which is why they were so aghast. And he's pulling himself up. And he said, I promised myself, you remember this? That if we ever found them, I would stand to hug them. And I'm like, Grandpa! So Grandpa's crying, Grandma's crying, and Nana's crying, and I'm crying. And the aunties and uncles are crying. The cousins are all just running around. And that was my first real introduction to them in person.
I was really nervous. I remember shaking. Chills were just going crazy. My mind was going 100 miles per hour. But I think after all the hugs and saying hi, I had my cousins, and it was fun. They were fun. They were, we were all playing around. We're taking selfies, getting on each other's backs, cracking jokes, talking about, do you remember this and this and this? And I'm just like, no. You know, because my cousins were like, I was brushing your hair and I would braid it. And, you know, and I didn't remember that back. But after meeting, I was happy. You know, I was thrilled. I had contact with my birth family again. I was able to kind of understand a little bit more than, you know, asking my mom questions, who had very solid, very clear answers. But be able to ask them questions and talk to them, it was nice.
The people that we had pegged as clearly the most functional couple in this group, there was an aunt and uncle, and they said, hey, you know, you're here in California, we live in Arizona. If you ever want to come to Arizona, come and visit. And I'm like, yeah, no thanks. But we weren't eager to go stay with them. But I said, we're actually going to be in Arizona in a couple of weeks for a basketball camp that my husband's doing. So maybe we can, you know, visit. So sure enough, we went, and 10 of us went and spent a week in the home of the aunt and uncle that we met at the park. So while we're visiting in Arizona, the birth family has cousins coming over and visiting, and everybody's so excited. And I remember you when you were a baby, I changed your diapers, blah, blah, and really marveling about the similarities, just in terms of genetics, the mannerisms that were the same, the laughs that were the same, those kind of things. And the aunt and uncle had said, you know, any questions that you all have, we'll be happy to answer. We'll answer them truthfully, etc. So we were enjoying the stay. I was spending a lot of time with them, and on about the third day, this one says, I have a question. And so her aunt's like, what is it, Mia? Right? And she said, you know, for the last 3 days, do you remember this? For the last 3 days, all of you have been loving us up and saying how much you miss us and how much you love us and how much you want to connect. Where the hell were you when we went into foster care? And I was like, ooh, what's going to happen with this, you know? And the room went silent for a minute. I thought, that's a really good question. Because I, as her adoptive mom, I don't know. I don't have the answer for her. Like, I need this aunt. So the aunt and uncle had 3 kids, one of whom has severe cerebral palsy, very spastic in a wheelchair, unable to speak, things like that. Very involved in the family, though. And her aunt said, you know, your uncle had a history of substance abuse, like your parents, and we were afraid that if we stepped up for you, that they would take our kids away. And we thought that our daughter would die in foster care because no one would know how to meet her needs and take care of her. I was like, oh. And she's like, oh, well, that makes sense. And then on they went with their day. It was so powerful because if she had come to me with that question, I didn't have an answer for it. And it was only because we took the risk of forging this relationship that she was able to have that satisfied in a really tangible, relevant way and move on.